This is my island in the sun, where my people have toiled since time begun. I may sail on many a sea, her shores will always be home to me.
Hey, good night, good night, good night, good night, good night. How's everyone? I'd like to welcome you all to Citrus Book and Poetry Night. It's a real special night tonight. It's kind of a Bajan culture night, very much so. We got two very amazing people, one icon for sure. To my right is Mr. Irvin Bergie. To everyone, general knowledge, mostly, this is the person who wrote our country's national anthem. Give him a round of applause, please. This man has... And he's also, you know, the person accredited for bringing calypso more so to the American shores in the way he redefined music and did everything. The Mirafai is amazing because when I read his autobiography, I did not know these things. I did not know he wrote Deo. I did not know he was the man behind Harry Belafonte's, you know, huge success as a music entity. So seeing here right now, you know, it's kind of surreal for me being next to this person who, you know, basically was one of the first superstars the world has ever known, basically. Yeah.
He was a big superstar, obviously, for me growing up, you know, in primary school, whatnot, singing the music, getting familiar with the composition and the words and the lyrics, all that stuff. Also, he's very daring in terms of interaction with people. If you ever get a chance to read the autobiography, which to me really hit home in terms of the journey of an artist, you know, over time you have a different relationship with people, you know, you have the love, the disappointments, the successes, so it really touched me because I am also having that journey. Ray was asking you how was your journey as you came along in terms of the struggles that you would have faced in terms of the segregation. Because I see you actually wrote quite a bit about that. Almost every junction you actually reflected upon the struggle of black people in light of the segregation.
Well, I think that happened because actually I was a young man and right in the middle of the civil rights revolution in the States. And so it was right after the war, and particularly the black people were making a move toward recognition as a group and to try to end discrimination in the United States. And I happened to be one of those people that was involved in that struggle because it happened during the time that I was a young man. I was in my early 20s and I was studying. I had never been interested in academics before, but I, because of at the end of the war, they decreed that all soldiers who wanted to would get a free college education on the GI Bill of Rights, which I readily joined right away and went to school for 4 years. At various universities in the United States, working at my craft, which was music and literature and writing and composing at the time. From then on, I met shortly after that a writer for Harry Belafonte, and they asked me to prepare an album for Belafonte, which turned out to be the Calypso album of Belafonte, which among the two leading songs were Deo and Jamaica Farewell. The album went on to become the first album in history to sell 1 million albums, and it went completely around the world, and the public for the first time became acquainted with the rhythms of the Caribbean at that time. which was back in 1955. So the music has been out now for some 57 years, and it's still going pretty strong, and it's been around the world a couple of times, and now I'm in my at this stage of the game. I've been through many things. I've traveled the world a couple of times and done most everything, and I'm just sort of involved in establishing my legacy at this point, and that's why this documentary was put together. I guess there would probably be some questions and answers about this, but I just give you a sort of a brief description of my work over the period of the last 57 years.
Oh, that's nice. Also, like what really stood out to me was that in the book you said seriously that you never really had music in your life, like it was never really a plan for you.
Well, I in those days, the only thing they had was a radio. Back in the 20s and in the 30s, there was no television or anything like that. So I used to learn all the songs on the radio. I knew every song that ever came out on radio by heart, and I used to sing them to myself and pretend that I was on stage. Yeah. And that was really my introduction to music, as it turned out. That was before I began to study seriously as a young man. While I was in the army over in North Burma and India during the Second World War.
So what made you decide to do calypso music for Harry Belafonte album? How'd that come about?
Oh, well, before that I had been doing a lot of research on the Caribbean music. And I opened up at the Village Vanguard in New York, as I said, with Louise Bennett back in 1954. And from there, I met Harry, and they loved the work that I was doing and the songs that I was creating. And many of the songs were bits and pieces of Caribbean folklore, you know, because they were dressed up and improved upon and made, you know, many songs that you might hear, which were old songs. All you actually heard was just a phrase. And they just completely repeating. But then I took these things and made them into a story, tell a story in 32 bars, you know? And that's what music is really all about. And they took this material and dressed it up, and I wrote the music to it also, and it became, there were songs that was done for, to be sung in bars and nightclubs for mostly tourists. But my approach to the whole thing was to write about the lives and the study of the people of the Caribbean, which was quite a bit different. And I was asked to write the songs for a new film that came out called Island in the Sun. And I wrote the main song for that film, and it talked about the islands and the people and the culture of the Caribbean. And it goes somewhat like this. This is my island in the sun, where my people have toiled since time begun. I may sail on many a sea, her shores will always be home to me. O island in the sun, willed to me by my father's hand, all my days I will sing in praise of your forest waters, your shining sand. When morning breaks the heaven on high, I lift my heavy load to the sky. Sun comes down with that burning glow that mingles my sweat with the earth below. I see woman on bended knee, cutting cane for her family. I see man at the waterside, casting nets at the surging tide. That is my interpretation and what I saw when I looked at the Caribbean. And it became immensely popular throughout the world.
What was the warmest memory that you have of your youth?
Well, my mother was, although she was from Barbados, and usually the upbringing of a Bajan child is usually much stricter than an American child at that time, especially at that time. But my mother was rather liberal with us. She gave us a relatively free hand, as opposed to the strictness of the general Bajan household, as far as the children were concerned. And I think that in the long run, I think it paid off. It allowed us a lot more freedom of thought and movement, and we made us depend more or less on ourselves and our own thoughts and inspirations, so to speak.
Reminds me of something Miss Nancy Jacobs said when she said that Caribbean people, black people, African people, are also very resourceful in the way they do things, period. Especially in crisis. So when you said it's very different, especially at that time.
Yes.
It was interesting. It just reminded me of that phrase. The other thing that I wanted to know was, your good friend is Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou, yes, we were very good friends.
How did that happen?
I was a member of many organizations at the time, and I was probably about in my mid to late 20s, and I also belonged to the Harlem Writers Guild, and in this group, we would read our works. You would have a chance to read your work in the group. Each week, they have about three or four people read from their works, and you criticize the work during the meeting. And Maya was, at that time, she was working on her first book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I was working on a musical called Ballad for Bimsha. And we both read in the Harlem Writers Guild at that time, which was in 1958, 1959. So we go back that far. And we've been very good friends. As a matter of fact, I just spent a weekend at her place last month, in which she lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina now. And she's doing very, very well. She actually, her home is like a whole village in North Carolina. I was quite impressed. And she's managed to keep herself going at a very high rate, even though she's now in her early 80s at the time, but we're still very good friends. And she spoke very well of me in my documentary, as you might have seen. Yes, yeah.
So my other issue is that almost everyone here is asking the same thing. Your songs were so big. Why do we not even know of?
Well, the point of it is that at that time, the publishers tried to pretend that Belafonte was also besides being the singer, they were trying to pretend that he was also the writer of the songs, but he wasn't, you know. So in fact, one of the reasons why I'm doing this documentary is to bring out all of these facts and to say what I put the record straight as to what my tour here on Earth has been for the last 50 years, you know.
When you did the anthem, as far as lyrically is concerned, as far as putting those ideas together, was it very difficult to you?
No, it was not difficult at all, because 10 years before that I had written the music for The Island in the Sun, which basically is saying the same kind of thing. They were struggling for independence and self-determination and so forth. That's what the civil rights movement was all about, and that's what the colonization was all about. They give up colonization. These people wanted the independence of the islands, and also the islands were used by the foreign powers in France and Spain and England. They used most of the Caribbean primarily as bases, as military bases, as naval bases. But you see, with the advent of the Second World War and the intercontinental ballistic missile, they didn't need the islands anymore, you know, because they can kill you from 10,000 miles away. You know, they didn't have to be next door like the Cuban crisis and things like that, you know. And so the islands started having a tough time existing, you know, and we're still having a tough time existing, because in many ways they don't need you anymore, you know, because their purpose in the long run was establishing military bases, and there's no need for military bases now. They can kill you from 20,000 miles, you know.
Hey, I had a question about modern day artists using your modern day artists using your songs as you know, like a remix, you chopping versions of your music and redoing it. Like I heard a modern artist name, they call him Lil Wayne.
Yes.
He remade a version of your song. Well, he used part of your song in his song. How do you feel about that? And yeah, just break down how you feel about that, please.
Well, I had no particularly negative feelings about it, because in reality, you couldn't prevent him from it. As long as something is out there, they can use it as long as they take out a license for it, unless there's something in it which is extremely offensive that you might want to fight. But also, it's a certain recognition. Particularly the youth of our society have accepted it, and on top of the whole thing, it brings in quite a bit of money. You know, it can make a difference in your yearly payroll, or your yearly intake, by as much as a couple of $100,000. You know, and so Lil Wayne and I will not have any problems on that score.
It's good to ask though, because at least know, I guess, especially know, writers and producers are more so accredited, and definitely so that, to the point that if you're not accredited, it's very you know, like companies, or there have been many cases in the past where writers and producers alike have sued for their royalties and have had grueling legal battles with record labels and publishers. Did you encounter any of this?
Oh,
as a
yes,
writer?
all the time. I only, there have been many people that have used my songs illegally. But it depends upon how large a situation it is. If it has to be worth it to have to go to court and pay lawyers and all that sort of thing. So the little light things, you just let it pass. You know, there are things you let pass. You only attack it when its value in dollars is big enough to really defend. You know.
Hi, good night. Mr. Bridges, I want to ask one question. Would you ever write a song about Barbados? Not Jamaica, Barbados? Just Barbados, because you wrote our national anthem, but would you consider writing a song about Barbados and the impact Barbados had on you, on your mom, on your family?
I did, but you might have missed it. It goes like this. Once I had a notion about this Bajan girl. So I put my thoughts in motion, found my heart in a whirl, going back to see her, for my days are done. Going back to see her in the land of the sea and sun. Okay?
Now you know, man.
Sing this one if you know.
This is my island in the sun.
Keep that there, man.
This is my island in the sun, where my people have toiled since time began. I know my role of many sing. These shores will be home to me.
Oh, island in the sun, built to me by my father's hand. All my days I will sing and pray of the forest water, the shining sun. Oh, island in the sun, built to me by my father's hand. All my days I will sing and pray for the forest water, the shining sun.
As morning breaks the heavens on high, I lift my head below to the sky. Sun comes down with a burning glow, mingles my sweat with earthly glow.
Oh, island in the sun, built to me by my father's hand. All my days I will sing and pray of the forest waters, the shining sun. Oh, island in the sun, built to me by my father's hand.